you so much for joining us for this episode of Leading Change. My name is Emma, and I've got Stephen with me today. And we're going to be talking about a shift from competitive to customer insights. But before I get to all the questions that I've got for you, can you give everybody an introduction?
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for having me today, Emma. Pleasure to be here. So Stephen Goldstein, about 17 years in the insurance industry. I've worked kind of across the board in sales, wholesales, at a carrier, at a reinsurer, investor, consultancy, and startup. Currently running my own consulting firm, Tetra G, focused on business strategy for carriers and agencies and startups. And I've also recently started working with a firm called Cake & Arrow. They are a research and experience design agency focused on the insurance and financial services industries that works with carriers and agencies on digital strategy, product design, front-end development, and design thinking and education.
Well, thank you for joining me. And for anybody that's watched one of these interviews in the past, I always like to kind of start by setting the stage. So as I teased, we're going to be talking about this transition from competitive intelligence, which our industry is very familiar with, to moving towards the idea of customer and insights and intelligence. So can you talk a little bit about like what that shift means and what it looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, anyone that's listening here that's in the insurance industry, we all know that we love numbers. We love looking at trends. We love looking at data. And that's always been really good for us to help with making assumptions for the future and helping to price whatever products that we're currently building or building for future customers. What's happening though with that is if we only look at numbers and metrics and data, we don't get a full view as to what our end customers and policyholders are thinking. And customers can also mean not just policyholders, but agents too, because a lot of insurance companies work with agencies and wholesalers and don't work with that eventual or end customer or policyholder. So this shift from business and competitive intelligence to customer intelligence, it's not taking away that business and competitive intelligence, but it's augmenting and supplementing that business intelligence with more customer experience, with more customer intelligence, more customer interviews, voice of the customer, really getting down and interviewing and understanding what those people like, don't like, what their preferences are, what they aren't, how they want to interact with their insurance companies, what their concerns are from a product perspective and what they want covered most. It's so important now for companies to really augment their competitive and business intelligence with this customer intelligence. And we're starting to see that shift of more forward-looking companies that have been able to really lock in how to incorporate that into their planning processes and their strategies moving forward.
So I guess when we take a look at where our industry is currently, there's probably a whole different full interview that we could have in terms of like shifts that are happening in our marketplace today. But why is this shift towards the customer and this focus so important with where we're at today?
Yep. Well, I'm going to quote a recent article that was written by Josh Levine, who's the CEO and founder of Cake & Arrow. He wrote an article. It was actually published this last week, and it was called "The Mindset Shifts the Insurance Industry Doesn't Know It Needs." And one of those shifts was around this competitive intelligence to customer intelligence. What he said in there was business insights tell you in the industry of where you are today. Customer insights tell you where you need to go. And to deliver meaningful value to customers, you first need to know what it is that they value. So this is important, again, because without talking to our customers, without understanding what it is that the big problems are that exist, and if we only look at data, we're not going to know what it is that the people that are buying our products or selling our products or experience our products really want. I spoke with an aspiring founder a couple weeks ago, and he was explaining about this problem that he was experiencing and how he wanted to build a new insurance product out of it. And he was explaining the product. And then his first question to me is, what what would a VC want to see if they're going to invest in a product like this? And I said, well, that other people other than yourself think that this is a problem. And he was kind of like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, other than you, who else think this is a problem? And is this like really something in the market that a lot of people are experiencing enough of that a VC is going to be interested in writing a check for something like that? And I said, before you even go the VC route, make sure that this is a problem that other people have other than yourself, and go and have those conversations, go and interview people. And to his credit, he's going out and doing that, and not just looking at the data, which is what he had started the conversation with, but actually going out and finding out from people if they are experiencing that same challenge that he is.
So this reminds me of, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Clay Christensen. He was a Harvard professor and wrote The Innovator's Dilemma. And one of his main things that he used to talk about was this idea of jobs to be done. And the best example of this was from the course that I took that he did, and it was focused on McDonald's milkshakes. And it sounds really silly when we're talking about it in the context of the insurance industry, but it was the fact that he and some of his graduate students at Harvard helped McDonald's figure out what job their milkshakes were doing for their customers, because they were looking to increase sales, and they were doing all of these things with the demographic that they thought was buying and the reason that they thought they were buying from them. So they would do things like put fruit into the milkshakes because they thought moms were buying them for their kids. And if they included fruit, they would think of them as more healthy. But none of those things were increasing their sales. And so when they did this jobs to be done study, they recognized that it was actually middle-aged men on their way to work that were going and getting milkshakes to have for breakfast in traffic on the way to work. And so when they would do things like put fruit in, they'd get stuck in the straw, and people didn't like that. And so when they started to shift the thought process of what job was being done, it was part of the reasoning behind the McCafe and why they started offering what I call adult milkshakes in the morning and all of their coffee offerings and all these things. But it was because they were able to tap into those customer insights as opposed to what they thought the problem was that they were solving. And I think that that just matches up so well with this of recognizing that there has to be a job that your consumers see that your product is doing for them. And if it's not there, or you're not hitting that mark, then they're not likely to buy from you.
Well, I love that, and it's interesting. Most of my background has been spent in the life insurance industry, and I've seen companies like Ben Akiva and Empathy come out that are like really focusing on that last mile, because the job to be done with life insurance is not selling a policy; it's paying a beneficiary claim when that person passes away. And we've got processes and we've got things in place to help that make that smooth, but having solutions and tools that are like really squarely focused on like that whole experience, not just like cutting a check to a beneficiary, is just really, really cool. So I love that. I love that analogy there.
So now I want to talk through where you've seen this really drive impact for your customers. So, what has that looked like when you're working directly with your customers to kind of offset that competitive intelligence or insights? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, I've used it in two examples from some of my corporate experience. One was when I worked at a company and we launched an insurance carrier in Poland. We had tons of data and competitive intelligence on the market, which products were being sold, commission levels, market share, you have it. And eventually my boss and I hired a couple of consultants that were hired to kind of do the more on the ground insights for us. And I remember it was almost out of a movie. Every time we'd meet with these consultants, it was like in a cafe. They'd bring like a little binder of all the things that they had collected and all the artifacts from their interviews that they had with the market, and said, okay, well, here's what these different people have told us. And they wouldn't tell us the actual names because it didn't really matter, but they would give us the persona or the archetype of the person, say, here's what this kind of person's saying, here's what a person from this kind of company is saying, here's what a person from this kind of, and those conversations, when we would bring those findings back to our management team and say, hey, look, all these business insights we have are great, but here's what the market is saying, and here's what we're getting from not just one person, but multiple different personas and archetypes, it was really able to shape our opinion on how we wanted to launch into that market. Now they're, I think, a top 5 carrier in the country, which is pretty cool. And I know a lot of it was embedded based on those insights. The second example was we launched a mobile sales application for our captive agency force in Malaysia. We had about 18,000 agents that were using this solution, and I was the project lead for it. We had a design firm, we had a tech firm, we had a core project team, but my lead kind of SME on the project formed a small group of super users that would go through skin by skin, screen by screen, and in line with our design firm would work with them to say, okay, if I'm sitting with a client, here's where I want this button to be, here's where I want this drop down to be, here's what I need in here, here's how I need data to flow. And we would take all of that with the designers, with the tech team, to then make sure what we were designing was going to be something that they would use. And it was kind of funny too, because when we came back and they gave us pushback on some stuff after we went live, we were able to say, well, hey, like, y'all told us you wanted this. So let us know really why you want this changed. If it's really something that client experience wise is not working, great. If it's just something that you're like, now you're just like, I'd like it differently. Well, we're not going to do it that way. We really need to make sure that it's driving and results in throughput. So two times that we when we launched that mobile sales app, like, we knew we needed to do it. The market was doing it. Everyone was shifting towards them, but we needed that real on the ground intelligence to formulate how we wanted to go to market and what was going to be the best tool for us to do so.
Well, I think that's also a really interesting idea of like how you manage the feedback from your team after the fact, that there has to be a reason behind why we're going to change things. We're open to feedback. We will make adjustments, but we're going to prioritize it, and we have to do it the right way, which I think is another really good message that we could probably have a whole nother discussion on as well.
Feedback loops and change management. I'm sure all of our project management people out there and developers are all saying thank you. Yes, have another session on that.
Well, thank you so much for joining me for the conversation, and
Thank you for having me.
Watching. And anybody watching, if you're not already, follow Stephen, as well as we talked a little bit about some of the articles from Cake and Arrow. I'll put those into the YouTube description for everybody to check out as well. But thank you so much for joining me, and have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Leading Change. If you liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe and come back weekly for more expert interviews on digital transformation, change management, and emerging technologies.